There's a new book out. It is fantastic. The Yankees Way, the untold inside story of the Brian Cashman era. It's a new book by SNY's Andy Martino, who spent the last 2 years getting exclusive interviews with general manager Brian Cashman and those who work with and around him. And Andy is joining us in studio. Good to see you.
I haven't argued with you guys on a white couch in a couple of years. This is nice to be back. It might be the same couch we've discussed. Thank you guys for having me.
No, the book's great, and we'll get into it. Before we get into the book, what did you make? Is Yankee fans are going to see that comment by Hal Steinbrenner, and they're going to pull their hair out. What did you make about what Hal had to say today?
Well, it's not what they want to hear after Hal told Jack Curry of the YES Network that they want to talk to Soto, obviously. Yeah. I can understand why people would feel a little emotional whiplash out of that. I'll say that it's consistent with what Hal Steinbrenner has always said, that they don't want that $300 million payroll. The one thing about Hal, in the reporting for this book and just being around the team, people maybe publicly see that very un-George-like, calm, rational facade. But he is a Yankee fan. He gets really emotional when they have a bad year or even a bad stretch of a couple games. They spent a lot of money this year and would have spent more if they'd gotten Yamamoto to sign with them. So I believe that the Yankees will re-sign Soto, that they are clearly the front runners to bring him back, even over the Mets, who have more resources. And in order to do that, Hal, he's a businessman. He knows what they have to spend. He mentioned money coming off the books. Gleyber Torres might want to start looking at what other cities that he could enjoy for the next couple of years of his life, and a few other guys. But I think this is not going to play great among the fans for obvious reasons, but I do think Soto's going to be a Yankee next year if I had to place a bet on that.
All right, let's move over to the book, which is fantastic, right? And kind of leans into, and Cashman is a controversial figure, I would say, in this marketplace. Why he's been in the position for, what, 27 years, right? I mean, a long time. What characteristics and traits do you think has led Cashman to stay in that position as long as he has?
It's the consistency. And sometimes I know fans maybe want a little bit more aggressiveness at times, but this is a guy who, when you talk to Yankee fans sometimes, especially if they're having a down year, which they're not right now, it's, oh, this guy's been around forever. Can we get some new blood? But when you talk to his competitors in the industry, not let alone the people that work under him who love him, they think that he is not only the greatest, many of them think, including Billy Beane, Mr. Moneyball, the most famous GM, told me Brian Cashman's the greatest general manager in the history of the game. I said, well, do you think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame? And Beane started yelling at me. He said, I'm sorry, but that's a ridiculous question. Don't use that man's name unless you say future Hall of Famer. And it's that consistency that we talk about, because every single team that's ever good, except for the Yankees, takes a couple years. They retool, they rebuild. Look at the Orioles right now. They were unwatchable for half a decade in order to get the draft picks and what they do now. So the fact that you can have 3 decades of consistent winning seasons, that other people that run teams are like, dude, that's impossible. So that's what it is. It's that consistency of competence with spikes of excellence that people see in the industry, and why Cashman's so revered by his peers.
Yeah, that's by his peers, but does it bother Cashman at all how the fans view him negatively?
You know, I don't want to speak for him on that, but I will say that in the book I report that over the last couple years, he, like anyone else in sports, like in that position, had a burner, Twitter. He was looking at fan reaction. He was reading the papers. In his office, there's a TV mounted to the wall in his office where I interviewed him. He used to have that on, whether it's MLB Network or YES or SNY or whatever it is, follow news of the sport. And now it's on, like, news, like CNN or what have you. And he is consciously not reading stuff. He told me he's not even going to read this book, which is about his whole career, which he didn't mean that in a bad way. He just meant, I can't take this stuff in anymore. So, you know, one could assume that that means that for his own mental health, it's time to stop listening. I mean, imagine if you thought you were pretty good at what you did, and the whole world is screaming at you every day, no, actually, you're terrible at it. I think at some point that would bother any human being, but he navigates that okay.
You know, Andy, generated a lot of headlines, the Coulter Bean story, Ron Guidry, right? 2006, when he was rehabbing in the 80-pitch bullpen session down in Tampa, which was the final crack in the relationship between Torre and Cashman. Who do you think changed, though? Because Torre thinks Cashman changed, Cashman thinks Torre changed. After working on this book as long as you had, all the people, who do you think really changed?
Well, it's like a breakup. I mean, if you, like, both parties in a divorce or a relationship breaking up sort of feel that way. And when I really drilled down on it, I found two people who used to regard each other almost like family back then, what we're seeing when they were so young. Torrey's like a father figure to Cashman.
Yeah.
But you know what changed Moose? The game. Because you got to a point in the early 2000s where there was more data coming in, front offices were having more influence, and Cashman was given more power in 2005 by George Steinbrenner. So when he's filming bullpen sessions and counting pitches, when Ron Guidry's the pitching coach, Torrey's like, Cash, you've changed. You're spying on me. And Cashman's like, Joe, you've changed. I can't get into your office anymore without having to get past your Bigelow tea sponsors. And your new players that have gotten here since the championship years, they don't feel like they know you. They don't feel like they get the attention the way Derek and Bernie and Georgie, you know,
guys
it's like
that won.
Exactly, guys that won. So there was like a class system in the clubhouse that Torrey and Jeter, the front office believed, were part of in that time. So I just think everything changed, including how front offices and managers relate, and that relationship just ran its course.
All right, Andy, A-Rod Jeter.
Yeah.
We knew it was bad, right? Did the public really know how bad it was?
We had an inkling at the time, I think. You as an opponent, probably, Nelson, and us as observers.
Yeah.
You could tell it wasn't warm and fuzzy, but they would always say, oh, the media is trying to make this into a thing. We're fine. They weren't fine. And in fact, this was Cashman's main, I'd say, leadership challenge for a decade or so, was managing these two. And we talked in the first segment about that, almost like the clicks between did you win in the 90s or didn't you? And because A-Rod came late, because he'd said some mean things about Jeter, I mean, he was not innocent in this at all. But Cashman would go to Jeter and say, you're the captain of this entire team. You have to be the captain of Alex, too, or you know, whoever else. So there were new people that came in that weren't, but this was kind of the flashpoint, the two stars that had this kind of frenemy relationship.
Yeah.
And, you know, they had their moments of chemistry, but ultimately, Jeter just could not really open up to A-Rod in the way that the front office wanted him to.
After he got ripped by A-Rod.
After he got ripped by A-Rod.
Yeah,
And Jeter never, Reggie Jackson told me, I made up with Munson, but once you burn Derek, you're never coming back. That's the difference.
That makes sense. You can't do things like that. 27 seasons in, how long do you think Brian Cashman continues on?
You know, there's a lot of speculation among people that work closely with him that this is his last deal. So through the 26th season, there's a guy in the organization, a former player named Kevin Reese, who's done scouting, player development. He's that model that the Yankees have kind of liked, melding an analytical guy with a guy with field experience. And I'd say he's seen internally as somebody who might be part of a transition plan as this goes on. The Steinbrenner family is so loyal, clearly, to a Cashman. They like the idea of keeping with a program. The Yankees have continuity in baseball ops going back to the 70s. They would rather stick with that plan because, frankly, they haven't had a losing season in that, as we said, for 3 decades. So we'll see how the next couple years go. But if the Yankees win, if this turns out to be their year, which sort of looks like, other than the past 2 nights, that they've got that vibe, I could see Cashman sort of beginning to think about that exit strategy or becoming some kind of an advisor. But he hasn't confirmed that yet. When I asked him directly, though, he plays it kind of coy. He certainly doesn't deny that that's a possibility.
Well, you can't do it forever, right? He's done it for a long time. Do you think Cashman, no doubt, do you think he's misrepresented in this marketplace?
I do, because all I can do as a reporter is trust what people tell me. And he's not necessarily that popular among players because he's blunt. Billy Epler told me a story once. He's jaw dropped. He's a young executive. Cashman walks up to a player. He's like, stop complaining, dude. We're trying to trade your butt, but we can't get rid of you. No one wants you. So stuff like that. He talks to players like that all the time. So players aside, the people that work under him, the people that work for him, the people that compete against him in front offices, think, as I said before, that he's great. And the way you get beat up every day in this market by people like us who have our opinions and our daily takes, I do think that that's what I'll say is there's just a tremendous gap in how he's represented by those two groups. So you could call that misrepresented for sure. I think he's good at his job because the results speak for themselves.
Is the Yankees GM gig the hardest job in professional sports with all the
great
pressure
question
on them?
You know, it may be. It's like we're talking about Kevin Reese taking over. It's like, okay, you sure you want that? It's like when Bob Watson quit, and Cashman's like 30 years old, and Watson goes, first of all, Bob Watson in 96 wins the World Series, of course. By 97, he's literally hiding in his office during the day, ordering takeout, watching soap operas. Because Cashman said he was like a lab rat. If he stepped out of his office, George would zap him, scream at him. So Watson's like, you got a lot to think about, buddy. He's going to offer this job to you. You sure you want it? Now, George isn't here anymore, obviously. But other than that, it's a pressure cooker town environment. And it may be. It feels like it to us. I mean, there's passion around teams like the Patriots. There's passion around other teams in other markets. But, yeah, I think if you, like, who pays attention what team is more attended to and talked about than the New York Yankees? Absolutely.
Andy, last one before we let you go is you set in to write this book. What did you want to come across, or what did you want to have come across to the audience?
What I wanted to have come across, whether you like the Yankees or Cashman or not, is that the story of the sport itself since the 80s is told through the Yankees because of the continuity they have. Brian Cashman gets there, it's like the Stone Age.
Yeah.
There's no analytics, it's all pen and paper, and now obviously there's cameras capturing biomechanical data at 1,000 frames a second. This one man has been here through all this, had a lot of success, but even if he hadn't had success, to me, the story of the game from '86 when he got there to now, that whole arc, that's through him, and that's what I wanted to tell.
Andy Martino, Yankee Way, does a fantastic job on SNY as well. Andy, best of luck with the book, all right?
Thanks for having me
Great
here,
to
guys.
see ya!
It is great to be back with my boys.
Oh,
here.
that's it. Love you, brother.